Concerned that Colin's lack of 40k lore knowledge is a bad look for the game, an unnamed game company has set in Professor Bailey Stromterius with critical instructions. Colin has just 12 weeks to become fluent with 40k lore, or he'll fail their test and the repercussions will be dire. Acknowledging the severity and timeline of the situation, Colin has set aside 20 minutes a week to prepare. This is that 20 minutes. Welcome to 40k Lore Crash Course.
Okay, Bailey. Lots of kids here, lots of dogs here. I don't know how long the void's going to hold out. We better get started. I feel like I should try to recap, and because I'm a verbal learner, it feels like I should recap what we learned last time. Yes?
I agree.
Okay, cool. So humans create sci-fi tropes that are dangerous, like robots and AI and stupid other lifter robots that smash you and probably other things. And that creates problems because they're humans. And then 20 shaman dudes are like, hey, we can fix these problems by making a dictator because dictators always help. And someone's like, no, it can't be a dictator. It needs to be an emperor for life. That's so much better. And so they make this perfect human being because naturally he's going to be able to solve everything. And then he's all like, hey, we should make an army and we should go kill all these, we should go resolve all these problems. And so he makes an army out of the Thunder Warriors, which have a terrible name and very wide shoulders, is what I remember from last time.
Yes, that is correct.
And so the Thunder Warriors, they were drugged up, ready to murder things, and they were sent to murder the things that needed murdering to resolve this kind of human civil war situation. And then the Emperor's like, that's cool, everything's at peace now. You know, I'm lonely because I don't have children and I'm perfect. And so he makes 20 sons because, as we pointed out in the last episode, that's the correct number of children to make if you're lonely. And then something happens that we don't understand, and all of the sons go pew off away to their planets. And the Emperor's like, "Yo, where are all my children at?" And so he goes to try to find them, but while trying to find them, he makes armies for each of them, which is a weird presumptive thing that he's so certain he's going to find them that he's going to make an army for each of them ahead of time. So he makes these armies, he goes out and he hands the armies out and he says, okay, you've grown up on this planet, but now it is time for your final duty as a murder hobo. And he tells all of them to go out and murder everyone. And all the Space Marines start wandering and murdering everyone. And then they have a war. Oh, I forgot something. I forgot that the Thunder Warriors have to get got.
Yep.
So I remember that before the Space Marines, he made the Custodes because he didn't have enough heavily armored soldier people. And then the Custodes murdered the Thunder Warriors. Yes. See, this is important. Thunder Warriors gone. Space Marines here, presumably friendly with the Custodes because the Custodes can just kill you, I guess. So, and then the Space Marines all wander out into the universe. And then the thing we ended on was they found some orcs. And the orcs were like, "Wah!" And then they were like, "No!" And they murdered the orcs, and the orcs died. And then the Emperor's like, "Okay, cool. I got to go back to Earth. Horus, you're in charge." How'd I do?
100%. Hit all the nails on the head. And like you said, you're on your quest for searching for the good guy. And I think it's important to note out that the Thunder Warriors, they weren't necessarily murdered. They were retired because they didn't exactly fit the vision.
Okay. They were They were laid off due to restructuring.
Yes.
Okay, great.
It was a really serious layoff, but yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah. So my takeaway I'm very fascinated and I'm excited to continue on. I left out a lot of the religion stuff just now in the summary, but I bet people will be okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
We will hit on it heavily.
You're
later.
a god. No, you're a god. No, I believe in God. Believing in God is bad. No, believing in God is good. There was a lot of that I left out.
We're at a very interesting point in our 40K history.
Okay.
Year 30,000, actually, right around there. And so the Emperor's returned to Terra to work on his top secret project. All of his sons ask why. He says, because I don't have to tell you. I'm just going to go do my stuff. Perfect parenting technique, like we said last time.
Uh-huh.
So the sons, now leaderless for the first time, at least from Daddy's supervision, are...
Horus is in charge.
Yeah, Horus is in charge. And to be fair, when the Emperor leaves Horus in charge, he is the right pick for the job. He doesn't, a lot of the brothers, some of them are quite upset that they're not the War Master. They all agree that Horus, for the most part, is the best of all of them. Some of it's begrudgingly, some of it's lovingly, but a lot of the brothers are like, well, I guess, I mean, it makes sense. You know, we'll do what he says. Horus sets out across the galaxy, and for the most part, he does a pretty good job. The crusade continues. Under his supervision, they capture hundreds of more worlds. dozens of more sectors. They're able to bring people into the fold. And like you said, kind of murder hobo, because while they aren't necessarily killing everybody, they kill everybody that doesn't agree to do exactly what the space authoritarian empire says they should be doing.
Well, and they're in giant spaceships that make it so they don't have to go home, right?
Yeah.
Like their giant spaceships are basically homeworlds in and of themselves wandering around.
Yeah, definitely. There's huge expeditionary fleets of whole chapters, which would be like 5,000 to 6,000 massive ships, and then all the accoutrement that comes with it. You have the Adeptus Mechanicus also attaching. So yeah,
because if you're gonna murder hobo, you need your wagon to put your loot into.
Yeah, and it's even better when your wagon makes you the bullets to do the murdering. So
yeah,
so even better, yeah, limitless bullets. So the crusade goes super, super well, but the whole time there's this question in all the sons' minds, and especially Horus's, this kind of like emptiness, this feeling of like, our dad's not here. This was his vision. And when he was with us, it felt so cool getting to do stuff with dad, murdering with dad. Super awesome. But now that he's gone, it just kind of feels like we're murdering for dad, and we don't know why. So it's just, and it would just cause a lot of kind of bad vibes in all the bros. So
right. Because if you send your kids to clean the garage, you get a different outcome than if you take your kids with you to clean the garage. This is the
and some stuff's going to get broken
for the emperor.
Yeah, and some stuff's going to get broken. Some stuff's going to go missing. You're going to be like,
they're not going to do as good of a job.
Oh, definitely.
They're not going to be as happy.
We have one son in particular, Logar, was raised on a religious world. This world was just crusades all the time, and like the worst of the worst kind. He had this crazy pseudo-human stepdad who like basically makes him the most, when they find him in his little capsule that gets dropped off on the planet as a child, the dad's like, this will be our messiah. And so he ends up ruling this world through religious crusade when the emperor finds him. He believes the emperor is a god because all the religion said that a golden being would come from the sky and take him up as his son. And so it worked out pretty well from their homeworld's religion standpoint. Now the emperor, when he meets Logar, says, no, there's no gods, only math and science. I'm not a god. Don't worship me. Logar is like, right, dad, you're not a god, right? Wink, wink. And so he from that point onward, through the next 200 years of the Great Crusade, makes everything about venerating the emperor as a god. Kind of secretly, but not really. And he gets more and more bold. He makes whole cities dedicating to the emperor being a god. And, it's a big galaxy. You can get away with this for a little while. But some of his brothers eventually tattle to dad and are like, hey, he's worshiping you as a god. And the emperor is like, that's not chill. Who really likes rules. My firstborn son, Rabute Gilliman, one of those firstborn types. You really like rules. You're kind of a little bit on the spectrum with how they need to be followed, to the point where you can't see past that. You're going to go and tell Logar that he screwed up and he's being censored.
And
Gilliman shows up.
That we're talking about now.
Oh yeah, Bobby G. And so Bobby G shows up with his legion, and Logar had just built this like super beautiful city and world. And Gilliman like annihilates it. And so Gilliman's like, I'll punish him by destroying his favorite thing. So he goes and he destroys the favorite toy of Logar. And he makes Logar and his whole legion stand on the ashes of their beautiful city. And he walks out and is like, Logar, you're stupid. Why'd you worship the emperor? You are now have to go on like this like Pentient crusade. And if we see that you do this again, we're gonna the books will heavily imply what happened to those two brothers that we don't know anything about, but they're gone, is going to happen to you. And Logar is like, whoa, not those two brothers we don't know anything about, that I know everything about, but I'm not going to tell the readers. Oh no. And so Logar's very sad. Dad's mad at him.
Because so not only did Bobby G kill people, he also, he killed innocent people as well.
They evacuated the city first, but when you nuke a city, you can't get everybody out.
I'm just saying that maybe we rule Bobby G out as one of the good guys as we move through the plot here.
I think potentially that might be a good idea in this period of time. Typically, at this point, and the reason why this Logar portion is really important, that's why I'm focusing on it so much.
No, that's
Logar
great.
At this point goes, well, dad isn't a god then. Fine. I'm going to go look for other gods. And so he goes off looking for a purpose. Now he could look at what the emperor was saying to do, which was preach enlightenment, math, the facts of the universe, but that can't be right. And I'm mad at dad. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna go look for other gods. And right. So they
what they thought you meant rather than what you actually meant.
Exactly. So he goes on this big spirit vision quest, and he finds the Eye of Terror, which is like this gigantic, this weird like hole rift in the far reaches of space. And so he will enter the Eye of Terror, and he'll meet the 4 gods, long story short, and he's going to be like, these dudes are pretty cool. These 4 chaos gods, they're going to be called chaos gods. They live inside the warp. They have realms inside the warp. That's where the Eye of Terror is a portal into the warp. These 4 chaos gods are Khorne, the god of war and death, Slaanesh, the god of access and perfection, but usually access to the point of bad things happening.
Oh, I see. Now everybody's so focused on the excess. I didn't know anything about the perfection.
Yeah.
People are too busy. It's kinky, and not actually. I don't know the rest of it. So that's fascinating. Yeah. Okay.
And that'd be a great episode to talk about because it is. I do feel like Slaanesh kind of gets done dirty to a degree.
Literally.
That's going to be an unpopular opinion, and there might be comments about that. But yeah. And then you have Tzeentch, the god of knowledge and the god of change, but it's never really the change you want. And then Nurgle, the god of life, but he's also the god of like disease because diseases are life, you know. Bacteria is life. Again, kind of gets a bad rap, but at the same time, like, you know, zombies made by bacteria that brings them back to life isn't always a good thing, you know. So these 4 gods, they parade themselves as not necessarily the negative elements of themselves, but the good sides of themselves. And they totally dupe Logar. Our little Logar, so hurt, so mad at his dad, finds these 4 really cool rock band dudes. And he's like,
4 sketchy grown-ups in a windowless van who have candy.
Right. and he all ends. And not only is it just him, but he brings his 200,000 sons with him. And they're all...
There's no room in the van for that.
It's a train.
Okay.
It's a tour bus.
Right.
A really big tour bus. So they're on board for the ride. And Logar is so passionate about this, he sends a whole bunch of his sons as emissaries to other legions to secretly propagate this worship of these gods. So he sends his most prolific preacher of a son, Erebus. So Erebus will attach himself to the hip at Horus's side and kind of be like a Grima Wormtongue for any Lord of the Rings fans out there. Always whispering in his ear, somehow works his way into all the secret war councils, super trusted, even though he's not from Horus's legion. As things go on, the crusade is doing well, as I was saying, but then Horus gets a call that one of the worlds that he had got to join the Imperium has rebelled against the Imperium. And this like really hasn't happened before. And so he's shocked. So him and his legion go back and they destroy the rebels. But during the battle, Horus is wounded by a nasty, dirty shiv, more or less, which you wouldn't necessarily think would be capable of wounding Horus, but it does. And Horus, this like demigod that
made it like a bar of soap and a toothbrush. Like what?
Yeah, pretty much. Super nasty. This like rusty, decrepit sword. And the weird thing is, Horus has been brutally wounded during campaigns, but Primarchs are like so strong and built, these demigods, that they don't normally care. They can fight through it.
All right.
But the weird thing is, he gets wounded and then down on his face, freaking unconscious immediately. And his sons are like, Dad! So they grab him and they take him on the ship, and they can't get the wound to stop bleeding. He's dying. The apothecaries are like, we can't save him. And then Erebus is like, hey, so you know that this moon of this planet that we were just on, there's some like witches down there, and they might be able to help him.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. And the sons at this point are like Yeah, the sons are like so freaked out that normally they would have been like, screw you, Erebus, that's crazy. They're like, we got to save Dad. So they rush him down to the planet, and they lock him in this sacrificial chamber area, and all these weird half kind of like, they're like have furry skin. They're strange. These strange like abhumans, they do this ritual, and they bring Horus back. The big problem is, while Horus is unconscious for like a week, the chaos gods that Logar had talked to are showing Horus visions of the current 40K future, where the Emperor is a god. And Horus just is like, oh my gosh, my dad went back to Terra, left me in charge so he could become a god, which is everything he said he didn't want to do. And of course, in current 40K, which some of our listeners might not know, but Horus is deemed a traitor along with many of his brothers. And so all their statues are removed from the Imperial Palace. And that's what Horus sees. He just sees some of his other brothers have statues and not him. And so he's like, so the Emperor must do that thing he did to my other 2 brothers that we don't know about, to me. So he freaks out and starts planning a rebellion, pretty much. So he immediately goes to the brothers that he's closest to. And he says, let me tell you about what I saw, about what our dad, the Emperor, is going to do. The brothers are mad, too, because they're like, I can't believe this is what's going to happen. And they a whole bunch of them end up siding with Horus. So Horus makes this grand plan, and he, with 3 of his other brothers, declare rebellion, and they go and they build this fortress on a world called Istvan. The emperor's outraged, and he sends, well, the emperor's, I mean, we actually don't know. We don't actually know if the emperor is outraged or not. Rogel Dorn is outraged. He's on Terra, and so gets a whole bunch of his brothers on the Zoom call, and he's like, "You need to go destroy Horus and shatter his legions. This is insane, unthinkable." And he's like hurt, angry, because like he loves Horus too, but he's like, "I can't believe he would do this thing." And so they send off 6 legions to deal with Horus's 4, because that should be enough. So the first 3 legions, which are salamanders, led by Vulcan. They are really good at like flame craft and are super strong. So they have lots of flamers and meltas and stuff. Then there's the Raven Guard. They're kind of emo, sneaky dudes, led by Corvus Corax. Ferrus Manus with the Iron Hands. And Ferrus Manus really loved his brother Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children, but the Emperor's Children Primarch had sided with Horus. So he's on a mission for vengeance. He's really mad at his really close brother that sided with Horus. And so the 3 of them land on the planet, battle erupts. And now we've never had Adeptus Astartes fighting Adeptus Astartes. So this combat is like insane. So many people dying on both sides. And it looks like the Loyalists are winning. And that's when the next wave of Loyalists comes, which are, unbeknownst to the Loyalists fighting on the planet, actually traitors. They just didn't announce they were traitors.
Awkward.
Yeah, a little bit. So as the Loyalists are pulling back to reform and regroup, the 3 other legions land and light them up. So there's a massacre. And those 3 Loyalist legions are pretty much wiped out to negligible numbers. Some of them escape. Ferrus Manus, one of the Primarchs, is killed by his brother Fulgrim, which is really big deal because Primarchs don't die that often. So that's a big deal. Right. And the other 2 are able to escape. Well, one of them's captured, one escapes. And the legions are destroyed. So that's a pretty big blow, considering now it's 9 traitor legions versus only really 6 Loyalist legions at this point. And so what ends up happening is Horus, from that point onward, begins his march to Terra with his brothers. And there are many just cataclysmically large battles. And as you can imagine, it's literally half the galaxy with Horus fighting half the galaxy with the Emperor and the super soldiers in the middle. And it splits households, it splits worlds, it splits governments, a true civil war. And honestly, Horus kind of kicks butt through most of it. And as he goes through, you start noticing changes within his brothers and himself. So as all these brothers fight in this war, they one by one kind of start declaring allegiance to some of these gods, because they see that it can make them more powerful, make them more deadly. And a whole bunch of these brothers end up siding with
And unlike the Emperor, this dad is giving them attention.
He is. Making you better at killing, making you better at learning.
Don't have good relationships with their father, they look for attention elsewhere.
Exactly. And that's 100% what happens. And it pretty much all accumulates at the Siege of Terra, which is this massive battle where Horus and all of his legions fight the Emperor and all of his legions. They siege the palace. After, I think it's like 3 or 4 months of the siege, brutal battle, and the Loyalists are losing. A valiant effort of defense, many Loyalists fight. We're at the final, the palace is breached, the traitors are pouring in, and the Emperor decides to make one last gambit. But he does because Horus lowers the void shields on his ship, which would allow a teleport strike onto his ship. But Horus wants to face his dad. Horus is like, I've come all this way, but I'm not going to come to him. He's going to come to me. And so the Emperor, with a task force with one of the brothers, Sanguinius of the Blood Angels, beautiful, perfect in every way. And then Rogel Dorn, we talked about, Master of Defense. And then a whole bunch of those Custodian Guard that we talked about before too, will all teleport onto Horus's flagship. And on there, when they land on the ship, the gods do kind of some timey-wimey funny stuff, and they all get spread out all over the ship.
Sure.
And the first one to find Horus is Sanguinius. Sanguinius, like I said, he's got angelic wings, which when you're trying to not preach religion, it's kind of crazy to have a son with these beautiful angelic wings. He can fly, looks like an angel, But he finds Horus first, tries to convince Horus it's not too late, come back. Horus, at this point, completely infused with all the Chaos God's power, is like just this monster. And he's like, it's way too late, dude. And they fight, and he kills Sanguinius, which has a lot of repercussions, and we'll talk about that in some of our Astartes videos. The Emperor then makes it to the bridge, sees his dead son at Horus's feet, and enraged duels Horus. And they have this like insane duel that takes place on like every plane of reality possible. And so they duel and they fight, but it's the Emperor kind of doesn't want to kill Horus because then he'd only have 15 of them left. But he doesn't want to kill Horus. He's his son.
Numbers again.
Yep. And so they duel, and the Emperor kind of holds back. Horus starts like really hurting him, beating him up bad. At the pinnacle moment of the duel, Horus will sever the Emperor's left arm and basically disembowel him with he's got that big claw we talked about. The Emperor has that too, but Horus also has that. Everybody got a big claw. So and he'll cut the Emperor's arm off, disembowel him, and while the Emperor is laying there, Horus will be prepared to finish him. This is when the lore is a lone guardsman steps in the way and distracts Horus for a brief second. And we talked about that a little bit. That's not necessarily true, but that's the lore.
Leroy!
That's right. Leroy Jenkins. He steps in, gets batted, but it gives the Emperor just a second to breathe, and the Emperor does a psychic attack that just destroys Horus' body and soul. Just like Horus gone, disintegrated.
Well, that's not fair.
Yeah, I know. So good old fashioned duel.
Yeah.
And then
it's like
mind bullets.
Gonna win. Emperor's like, no, it turns out I can just cheat. Okay, fine.
Yeah, destroy you. So Horus is destroyed, and the Emperor collapses to the ground, dying because he's super wounded.
Sure.
At this point, Rogel Dorn runs in and is like, "Dad, brothers, oh my gosh!" Because there's like not only a dying dad, but 2 horribly murdered brothers, and so pretty traumatic. He grabs the Emperor, rushes him back to Terra, where there is this golden chair of psychic amplification that the Emperor was working on. This was his secret project. And we can go into that in another video as well, because that's super interesting. But sticks the Emperor on the chair, which will keep him alive at a cost of 1,000 psychic souls a day, basically.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah,
I've heard that number the whole time I've been playing 40K, and it's so absurd. Yeah. And I wanted to make sure that it's correct.
The chair is like connected to like 1,000 pods, and they throw psychers in them. They get their essence juiced out, just like in the Dark Crystal, and the Emperor gets to live another day.
Yeah, terrifying children's movie.
Honestly, so at this point, when Horus dies, the traitor legions collapse. Even though they're on the brink of victory, it's such a staggering mental blow to all of them that they end up fleeing the planet. Even though they're on the brink of victory, they end up fleeing the planet. Some of the sons that weren't at the siege show up just in the nick of time to also kind of take advantage of this panic. And the Emperor's legions are victorious. And all the traitor legions, the remains of the traitor legions will flee and go into the Eye of Terror eventually. And now we are left with a dying Emperor kept alive by 1,000 people's souls getting sucked out of them every day. We have, which seems kind of bad, if you ask me. We have the other brothers trying to put together this war-torn Imperium that's been absolutely destroyed. And a bunch of other brothers who have now completely gone, to a degree, many of them have gone like insane and are leading these like horrendously debauched legions inside the Eye of Terror. Though at this point, it seems like they're gone for good because they all fled into this warp rift and they didn't come out. So probably okay. Definitely not going to come back. So that's where it leaves it. The Imperium has to rebuild itself. There's just a lot of issues because, of course, when there's so much to be fixed, a lot of weird stuff gets in because it's not necessarily being monitored. So all of a sudden, there's a really big Church of the Emperor now of a bunch of people that see him as a god that saved them from Horus. And so quickly that rationality, that science goes out the window because the few remaining Imperial Primarchs, they can't really police all of this.
Science.
What was that?
He didn't win through science.
Yeah,
they literally lost the battle of the pew pew and the zap zap at each other. And then the Emperor said, actually, I have this power called Deus Machina. And it just blows you up. And then the story just continues. And if I were a human, I'd be like, oh, well, okay, great. So he's a god. Fine. Yeah,
exactly.
Right?
So, and basically, so Terra isn't ruled. So much of the lead up now is all the Primarchs are super scared of this happening again. And so they make rules against themselves. They make rules against their legions. And they put the hands of humanity among the High Lords of Terra, these 12 flawed humans. And of course, we know what happens when 12 people rule huge amounts of humanity, corruption, issues. that's kind of where the Horus Heresy will end, and
Okay.
and that's where it gets its name, the Heresy, because heresy is a religious term,
Mhm.
and Horus rebelling against his god emperor father, and so the church runs along this. And yeah,
Well,
then
and
we
he
have
does it because he's corrupted by other gods, so even more of a
Correct.
heresy.
correct.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. I didn't know lots of stuff in there, and it's funny how you can hear the bits and pieces all over the place, and when they actually get put together, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see how all the other stuff ties back to it, because again, I know it's their origin story.
Yep.
We'll find out about that next week, I guess.
Yeah, we'll talk about
Cookies,
the
they're coming through the
Adeptus
doors.
Astartes. What was that?
They're coming through the doors.
Oh.